Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Greetings on this Canada Day. It seems now, more than ever, we are truly taking in what it means to be Canadian. Definitely beyond this classic commercial from 25 years ago.
The beaver is a truly proud and noble animal. A toque is a hat. A Chesterfield is a coach. And it is pronounced said, not Z. Canada is the second largest landmass, the first nation of hockey, and the best part of North America. My name is Joe, and I am Canadian.
I'm Melanie Ng, and in this episode of The Big Story, we take a closer look at Canadian identity, how it has evolved, why it means something different depending on who you talk to, and how we are viewed on a global stage, especially with the ongoing tensions with the United States. Joining us for this conversation is Howard Ramos, a political sociologist at Western University. Thank you so much for joining, and happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day.
An interesting conversation here because I feel like this topic of Canadian identity truly evolves every year. But this year, especially with what we're seeing with the new administration in the US, ever since we heard the words 51st state uttered from the American president, it's like we were on guard and something changed with our mentality. How do you see the politics of it all changing our perspective?
Well, with this external threat that we've had from the language of 51st state, it's really led to a rallying around the flag and a nationalism that we haven't seen for some time. It's quite interesting to note that probably not since the Quebec referendum in 1995, which is the 30th anniversary this year. And that really sparks all kinds of changes. It's a very different type of nationalism, a very different rallying around the flag. And we see a very sudden shift in things. About a year or two ago, Canadians were kind of down on the country, especially younger Canadians and those who are conservative, many Western Canadians. But with the 51st state threat, we saw a huge surge of nationalism.
Once Donald Trump was elected, we saw a lot of change, a change in our government, a federal election, and it seemed that part of his messaging, Prime Minister Mark Carney, was, I'm standing up for Canadians. That seemed to be his mission. His first meeting, sit down at the White House, all eyes, the world was watching, not just Americans and not just Canadians. Everyone wanted to see, is this Prime Minister going to stand up for us? Interestingly, when we saw at the G7 summit in Kananaskis just recently, that lapel pin that President Trump wore, the dual pin, it was the Canada and the American flag that sat on his suit, seemed to send a message that, okay, we are not to be stepped on. So from your perspective, what kind of symbolism stands out there in just the visuals?
Well, I think that with Trump, a lot of it is playing games and his way of, as he would say, trying to cut a deal. And I think that it's important to look past some of the symbolism. Mark Carney leaned in very heavily into the elbows up meme and even had Mike Myers appear in one of the campaign ads. But when we take a step back and we look actually at what's being done, I think that's the important thing for Canadians to do on this front. And what we see is a toning down, a beginning of negotiation. We see most recently the commitment to increase the defense spending. And so if we take that level back, we see a toning down of rhetoric, we see a change of symbolism. But the minute we see less substance or somebody wants something out of the other, I fully expect Trump to start talking about the 51st state again and a move to wave the flag again as well. So I take it with a little bit of a grain of salt.
What would you say sets us apart from our neighbors to the south? I mean, this can go in any which direction, Howard, but when if someone were to categorize a Canadian versus an American, how do you see it?
Well, there are so many differences that make us unique. And, first and foremost is that Canadians are comfortable with plurality. We're a country of plurality. We're a country of First Nations, Indigenous peoples. We're a bilingual country officially with English and French. And so it's always important when we think about Canada, not to just think about English Canada, but the dual cultures that exist. We're a country also that has tended to be a pragmatic country. So we tend to be progressive, but we're also pragmatic and fiscally conservative. So these are unique things about Canada. And, we could go on to all kinds of other things. Like we like to play hockey. We have maple syrup. We seem to have an affinity to drinking Timmy's and having our own language, both in English and French. So we have all kinds of things that make us unique as a country and stuff that we're very proud of.
What's interesting, when you said hockey, we always say this is our game. And you really saw, in the Four Nations Cup, the Canada versus US, and you speak to any sports analyst and they said, this goes beyond the game, right? This was no longer just about hockey, which we claim as our sport. But this truly was an us versus them situation. It felt like, and even for people who were not hockey fans, where everyone was Team Canada. Do you think that we're in a space where people have bigger pride in this country right now?
Oh, most definitely. The Four Nations face-off was basically on par with the Olympics. It was on par with the 72 Summit Series. It was a significant event. I was a bit of a naysayer, thinking that, you had to subscribe to see it. But the next day with YouTube and replays, and the memes that came out, it was a big point of conversation for Canadians. And I would say not just hockey. We see the same kind of pride with the NBA championship and the first Canadian to win the different accolades from the NBA. So you see it across sports, and we see it in soccer as well. So I think that there's a true intersection of the kind of pride in Canada and sports.
When someone looks at Canada, depends on who you speak to. They will have a different answer as to what it means to be Canadian. You talked about the 30th anniversary of the 1995 Quebec referendum. And so, if you were to have this conversation with someone in Quebec, looking to separate, it would be very different on how they view Canada. How does that impact us as a nation? And especially we're seeing that in Alberta, some of that conversation as well with Danielle Smith. So when I sit here in Ontario and then I hear conversations in Quebec or Alberta, are we truly united?
I think that we are. I think that a healthy country is a country where you can have debate. A healthy country is one where you can have divergence of opinions. And compared to 30 years ago, we aren't seeing any threat to the nation by any comparison. So, in 1995, it came within 1 percentage point. We look at the by-election that just happened in Alberta, and really it's Alberta now that's the bigger threat in terms of separatism. And it's a third-party finish in terms of the Alberta Republican Party and less than 20% of the vote. So I think it's really important for us to put it into perspective, recognize that there's always going to be some people who are going to have issues. And for, take a very Canadian approach and take a step back and listen to what those issues are, because both in Alberta and in Quebec, there is some substance to the concerns that people have and the grievances they have. And there are things that we can do different as a federation.
When you think about all the newcomers to Canada, and that for many is the beautiful part of it, because we are this cultural mosaic, as they say. And so do Canadians see themselves as storytellers and bringing in pieces from their past together as to become Canadian? Or is being Canadian something different? Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like my parents, came here from the Philippines, and they bring with them stories. And so now when they tell their stories, when they go back to the Philippines, that's coming from a different perspective. How does that all intertwine?
Well, I think that this is what Justin Trudeau probably got wrong when he said that Canada was a post-national country. But I think that what he was trying to do is update this kind of language of multiculturalism. And what I would say is we're a citizenship plus country. So I'm Canadian, but I'm also Ecuadorian Canadian. I'm also Swedish Canadian. For most of us, we're either immigrants, newcomers, or the sons, daughters, or grandchildren of newcomers. We're a country that's very vibrant. And likewise, the kind of citizenship plus works for First Nations as well, and Inuit. Indigenous peoples are Indigenous peoples and Canadian. So I think that what it does is it makes us a more interesting culture, one where we're quite comfortable eating pancit, but also eating falafel, while also having crumpets. So, this makes us a very vibrant place to be and an exciting place.
I like the shout out for the pancit because it is a delicious Filipino dish. So thank you for that, Howard. Let's talk about when we travel around the world and how we are viewed. It used to be, if you're going backpacking, what do? You put on the Canadian flag and you slap that on your backpack. And then this says, or is supposed to say to anyone around you, I'm friendly, you can approach me. Do we still have that reputation, do you think?
I think that our international reputation has been a little bit hidden in the last decade or so. I don't think that we've done as good a job as we used to at promoting ourselves, in part because of cutbacks by the federal government to Heritage Canada and promoting the country abroad, and in part because a lot of our biggest superstars, especially in English Canada, are indistinguishable from American superstars. They move south of the border for the bigger market, and much of the world thinks of them as American rather than Canadian. So there could be a little bit more flag waving on the international front. I would say that I think that Canada probably is seen as an okay country, and nobody has any big beefs with Canada. Well, there are some countries that might have some beefs with Canada, but by and large, I think our reputation is still a pretty good one, but it's a largely one that's getting kind of overshadowed, and we haven't been doing as much at promoting it on the international stage, which is a bit ironic given how many international connections we have.
How do you think we can better promote it? Who should be these spokespeople outside of the politicians? Are we talking Hollywood? Are we talking our athletes? Are we talking policymakers? Who are the big voices?
Well, I think all of the above, except for Hollywood. I think that it's Hollywood North. It's Toronto. When we think about the cultural production we have in the country, French Canada through Quebec has a little bit of a better cultural production system and production of movies and stories, and in English Canada we tend to not do that as much. So there's a huge opportunity to fill the gap, especially as Canadians are interested in our country and our culture, for the private media sector to play a role, but also businesses. And I see some of that with the Buy Canada and the Maple Leaf now showing up on more products, helping people understand what is coming from the country. But it's all of the above. It's provincial governments, it's businesses, it's the federal government, and it's you and me, every Canadian.
It feels like it hasn't been up until us feeling threatened that we have been able to say we can do this domestically. We don't need to look to our neighbors here, there, over there to make these products, do these things. Why do you think it got to the point where had to be threatened to feel like we had to step up and say, we can do this on our own? Is this just an economics thing, or is this more of a, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it almost feels like we did it because we had to.
Well, in many ways, we did do it because we had to. We were kind of the gauntlet was thrown down, and we were questioned on whether we exist or whether we will continue to exist. And we were able to take it for granted for a long time that we've had amicable relationship with our American counterparts, and we took it for granted for a long time that we didn't have to wave our flag and define who we are. But now the world is changing, and I think that doing so, Canadians are rising to the occasion. But I think it's a lesson for folks that we need to do this. It needs to be part of our muscle memory as a country. We can't just do it when we're threatened. We have to do that all the time. And that's what makes a healthy country too. So, we were very blessed and lucky that we didn't have to do too much muscle flexing, but that's also very Canadian. We don't tend to do that. We tend to be calm and collected, and then when the going gets tough, we rise to the occasion.
If you were to look into that crystal ball 5 years from now, very hard to do on so many aspects, but if you were to do that, and if I were to ask you these same questions about Canadian identity, do you think your answers would be different?
They will definitely be different. The world's going to change in the next few years. It's constantly evolving. But I think that a lot of stuff will still remain the same. There's some constants in Canada. The relations between Indigenous peoples, Quebecers and Canadians, the role of multiculturalism and immigration, the tensions that happen from different regions, those are all going to be issues. And when you kind of look at Canada today, and if you take a moment to look at our history, many of the things that we're discussing today are not new issues. We've had past instances of tension with Americans, and you can think of Trudeau Sr., who talked about being a mouse beside an elephant, and so it's not new that this is going to happen. And there's going to be ups and downs on the international stage. Things might look kind of dire today, but we've gone through it in the past, and I imagine we'll get through it in the future. What that future will be, I can't guess, but that's what makes it exciting.
For you, you work with the University of Western, and I assume the curriculum is constantly being updated to apply to what we are seeing today. What are some of the pieces that you're hearing from, say, students or fellow faculty member on how to approach some of that curriculum? I mean, I can tell you that when I went to university, it was a long time ago, I was a history minor. And when we learned about Canadian history, I assume what I learned very different from what they are learning today. So is that constantly being updated then?
It definitely is being updated, and it has to update because cultures are always evolving. Octavio Paz, a Mexican poet, best said it once, that when you canonize culture, it's dead. So a healthy culture is one that will change and that will adapt. And, we are facing some significant global transitions right now in terms of environment, and in terms of geopolitics. In terms of AI, and these are all going to have impacts on curriculum and what it means to be Canadian.
Howard, I'm going to leave you with this final question. If you were to define being a Canadian in 3 words for you, with your background, with your knowledge, with your insights, what 3 words do you describe Canadian being like?
3 words for Canadian: diverse, humble, proud.
I love it. We're going to leave it there. Howard Ramos, appreciate you taking the time with us. Love this conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks.
And that was The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can always find us on the Seeker app or on all of your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. I'm Melanie Ng. Happy Canada Day. Thanks for listening.